Hi, welcome to the Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully, and today we have Josh Reppun with us from Hawaii. I am so excited. We have that mutual connection since I taught in Hawaii some years ago. And Josh is going to share about not only his teaching journey, but this mission he is on with his podcast, which is called What Schools Could Be, and also his civics work dedicated to the film, the documentary Most Likely to Succeed, and what he envisions for the future of education and really using Hawaii as a model for innovation. And the last time we talked, we shared a lot about the school that I was teaching at, actually the high school. I was at the intermediate school. So I am really excited for this conversation. Thank you for coming on the show.
Happy to be here.
So, my first question for you is what got you into education? Did something inspire you, or did you kind of fall into it? I think this was a second career, right?
Actually, that's a great question. It's a long and winding road to echo the Beatles song. Actually, it was my third career. I came out of high school having really not done very much as a high school student. I was one of those under the radar students who was much happier after I left school every day. I went to college for a year. That was kind of a waste as well. And then I happened to move to San Francisco. And while I was in San Francisco, I met somebody who took me to lunch at something called the California Culinary Academy. And the minute I walked in the door and I saw those tall hats and those awesome chef uniforms, I was like, I want to be a chef. And amazingly, my father actually agreed to pay for it to go through the Culinary Academy. So I had a career as a chef. Then I left that after about 8 years and I got into hotel management in San Diego and then back here in Hawaii. And at the end of those 4 years of hotel management, I decided that I actually wanted to go back and finish my undergrad degree. And so I had a friend living in Iowa, and I decided, what the heck, why don't I go be an Iowa Hawkeye and get my degree from the University of Iowa? So I was in their College of Education, but only briefly. I knew pretty quickly that that wasn't a route that I wanted to take into teaching. It just felt too scripted to me. And so I went ahead and got my degree in history and then moved back to Hawaii and talked my way into my first job at an independent school here in Hawaii, which you know well, Punahou School. And I became a history teacher at Punahou School. And then 17 years later, after three different stints at three different independent schools, I left teaching. And that's when I began my What School Could Be work and my Most Likely to Succeed work. So it's a very long and winding journey for sure.
I love that. I think I've had a few guests on that always have that kind of similar story where it's either second or third career and they kind of find their way into it. But I love how now actually leaving the classroom, you are doing work on a bigger scale that can really impact more schools and really the education system. So do you want to talk a little bit about your podcast and also your work that you're doing alongside that
Yeah.
documentary?
Yeah, so when I left my final teaching stint at Iolani School here in Honolulu, by that time I was probably 6 years into doing a lot of ed tech work. And I loved being kind of on that front edge of ed tech when everybody was just going kind of wild about iPads in the classroom and one-to-one classrooms. And I felt like I was in the middle of that mix. And that was a really, really fun, creative, kind of imaginative time for me. So when I left teaching, I actually ended up working at Apple as a retail sales specialist at the one of the three stores here in Honolulu. And pretty quickly after I started working at Apple, a couple of friends in education introduced me to this film, Most Likely to Succeed. The executive producer is Ted Dintersmith. And that was a life-changing moment, no joke. I mean, in that hour, that 90 minutes sitting together with these four other people watching this film, I knew in a heartbeat that things were going to change for me. And the reason why I knew that is because I had always wanted to be a part of the Reimagine education movement that was just beginning at that point, looking at what it really meant to be a 21st century student, a learner, and also a 21st century teacher. And I knew that the film was going to give me opportunities to be able to screen it and then build discussion sessions after the film was over. So that's really where the journey began. The producer, Ted Dintersmith, went on a 50-state tour. He ended that tour in Hawaii. I curated his 6 days here in Hawaii, and that began our partnership together. He went on to write the book, What School Could Be. And then the podcast came about because I was looking for a way to take that chapter at the back end of What School Could Be and make it longer. And eventually I landed on the idea of a podcast. And I found somebody actually at the back of the Apple store one night right before we closed, this total tech geek who works and lives here in Hawaii, who had all the technical knowledge along with my mission and vision. We started working together and we stood the podcast up. Originally, Jackie, it was titled, the name of the podcast was What School Could Be in Hawaii. And I made it my mission to go out and find the most amazing educators I could find in the state of Hawaii and to give them an opportunity to tell their stories. A couple of years into the show, and to my utter astonishment, I couldn't believe the numbers that were coming back at me about who was listening. Um, I dropped the in Hawaii from the name and began interviewing people outside the state. And at that point, the J curve happened where the number of listeners really went through the roof. And I'm just, Jackie, I'm so astonished. Every day, I am astonished that I'm closing in on 90,000 downloads in over 110 countries. And
Wow.
what this tells me is that there is a real hunger to hear the stories of amazing, innovative, creative, imaginative educators who are just tirelessly putting their hearts and souls into their work every day. And that's where I am right now. That's where the podcast stands right now. But that's how it got started, was in the back of the Apple store one night, where these two people who brought their strengths to the table right away, his geek strength and my mission and vision strength. That's how the partnership began. So I love this story. It's just a really fun origin story. Yeah.
It is a fun origin story. And I think it's actually a big theme I'm seeing in since like 2023 for me is all about collaboration, like bringing people from different backgrounds and, having maybe a common vision and working together to make this happen. And that is a credible, successful podcast, 90,000 downloads in 110 countries. You're reaching a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
have come to find through my podcast, I do not have anywhere near that downloads, but I've interviewed people from around the world, and there's so many people outside the industry that care about education. And that is where you want to build those bridges and have those relationships that could lead to future collaborations. Because if you have people in the business world, entrepreneurial world, and then people with inside still the education system that has more of maybe the network and just that like experience of what it's like to be in the classroom, and you put that together, it's just magic. And
Yeah.
so, kind of my next question, kind of going off the cuff of how I usually do this, because I'm just so curious about the meat and potatoes of all of this, is could you
Sure.
tell us a little bit about, first, the documentary and why that hit you? Like a single viewing of a documentary changed your life path, really. So a
Yeah.
little bit about that, and then maybe how um not only you came to the podcast, but like some of the people you've had on and some of the things that you are learning about with these different innovative educators.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Most Likely to Succeed is a very unique film, in my opinion. There are, as you know, zillions of documentaries out there, and many of them come with an agenda. And Most Likely to Succeed did just the opposite. Basically, what it said was, in the first 15 minutes, it made the case that the world was changing at hyper speed. And it brought all of these talking heads in to reiterate that point. People like Tony Wagner and folks from Google and MIT labs and so on and so forth. So those first 15 minutes are very compelling about how the world is changing. And by the way, that was 9 years ago. Imagine that the AI wasn't really on
Mm.
anyone's radar screen at that point, right? And then the film spends the rest of its time, 45, an hour and 15 minutes, sorry, focusing on a single school in San Diego, which is High Tech High. High Tech High is now, I think, 15 or 16 schools in the San Diego area. But the what was so compelling about the story that was told is that it was really about the kids who were at High Tech High and the work that they were doing in partnership with their teachers. So it's almost like you weren't looking at teachers at all. You were looking at guides,
Mm.
coaches, mentors, sponsors, working with these kids in a project-based learning environment. And so the fact that the film doesn't have this really strong agenda, it was just like it was giving us a window into something that seemed very relevant. And so I remember, Jackie, the first time that I screened it, it was a big audience. It was back in my home community in Kahalu, where I grew up on the windward side of Oahu. I did it with my brother, who was the executive director of this community center. And we got almost 200 people to the screening. And
Wow.
this was community members, business people, nonprofits, educators, friends, family. And after the screening, after the film finished, and this was on a Friday night at about 9 o'clock at night, I had this whole post screening discussion thing set up. And there was this terrifying moment when I thought everybody was going to get up and leave, and there would be like five people left, to talk about the film. Nobody left, not a single person left. And so we launched into these roundtable seminar sessions. And after an hour, I tried to close it down and they told me to go away. They were like, go away. We got more to talk about here. And so I heard stories for weeks afterwards about people who were sitting in their cars talking about what they'd just seen. They were talking about it on the way home. An argument broke out in the women's bathroom about what some of the key themes were. And I knew that there was something quite magic about this
Mm.
film. So I just kept on screening it and screening it and screening it and having these discussions. And we gained a lot of trust here in Hawaii because people were coming to these screenings, while they were leaving the screenings, understanding that their voices mattered, that they had made a contribution to the conversation that was breaking out all over the islands in Hawaii about what school could be, even though the book hadn't been written yet, right? So that's kind of why the film was so powerful. And we're coming up on the 10th anniversary, January 25th, 2025 is the 10th anniversary of the debut of the film at Sundance Film Festival. And those of us on the team at What School Could Be are already thinking about what an awesome celebration we can put together, for something like that. So I just rolled with that. And over the course of these last 9 years, it's been a process of engaging people in the film still. It's a timeless film, but also engaging them with the book, What School Could Be, and engaging them in the ever-growing set of resources that are available for free to anybody who goes to whatschoolcouldbe.org. We've built a huge library of resources out there. And so I work as kind of the evangelist for whatschoolcouldbe.org. And at the same time, I'm the host of this What School Could Be podcast. So it feels really good, Jackie, because
Mm.
it feels like we're becoming a trusted collaborator and partner with a lot of people all across the world. That's just a very good feeling to have. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Um, you asked about special guests,
Yeah.
and a minute ago you mentioned like all of the people outside of education who are really interested in what's going on in terms of reimagining education. And I'll cite one episode in particular, a very chance encounter with this guy named Parul Punjabi Jagdish. So Parul happened to be coming through Hawaii on a trip, and I was introduced to him at a party, and we got to talking. It turns out that he's one of the CEOs. He's the USA CEO of an organization called AIME, AIME Mentoring, which was founded in Australia. And the idea is it's a massive mentoring program that takes college kids and trains them how to be mentors. And then the mentees become mentors. And that episode was the first one that I did outside of education. And it really pushed me to some places I had never gone before. And it was almost a spiritual experience to go
Mm,
through this with parole. And if anybody listens to that episode, they can see that these are just two people who deep dived into each other's lives, and we just have a fantastic conversation. But it really gives you a sense of how external organizations are playing a huge role in reshaping what
mm.
school could be. And that part is very exciting to me. Only getting started on that part for sure. Yeah.
I will plug that in the show notes, that episode. So I have to listen to it as well. And I can connect with that. I've had guests on this show where I've had those kind of spiritual moments where we're just so in sync and
Yeah.
there's growth happening in real time. Like you're growing as a human in that conversation. It's unbelievable. I mean, I think that's the power of podcasting, really. You
It
meet so
is.
many cool people from all over that
Yes.
you wouldn't normally meet. And
Yeah.
I really see this as a movement, and you have it like within kind of your profile that you are leading a movement. It's not just about we're screening, watching these films, we have this podcast, we're talking about it, but this can really be a global movement. And I have a question about does the screenings happen all over, or has this mostly been like what you've been doing in Hawaii, or is there part of this movement to look for other individuals who are excited about this? Because I already got kind of like an idea of like I would love to do a screening here in like the tri-state area because I'm in like the Philadelphia, New York City area. Is that something that happens, or is that part of maybe a vision?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So I'm going to go back just one brief step and share with you that when Ted Dintersmith debuted the film at Sundance, January 25th of 2015, he was immediately approached by Netflix and they made him a pretty ginormous offer and he turned it down. And the reason why he turned it down is because he wanted to move forward with a community screening model. So what that meant was he went out and found this organization that would help do the coordination. And all across the country, people had the opportunity in their schools, their churches, their community centers, business, boardrooms. They had the opportunity to screen the film, and there a bunch of guidelines for how to have discussions about the film were provided. And I think that Ted made a brilliant decision there, just brilliant. Because if it goes to Netflix, you know how that works. A
Mhm.
lot of people see it all of a sudden and then it dies. Then it's just gone because there's always this continual kind of avalanche of new films that are coming. So the end result of that is that the film was seen at over 30,000 screenings over the course of like the first 5 years after it came out. So it clearly had a
Mhm.
life and an energy of its own. But the other part, Jackie, is that it is a timeless film. Even though the first 15 minutes doesn't talk about ChatGPT or anything like that, what it's saying is we have to be aware of how quickly the world is moving, and we need to be agile and mobile in education to be able to meet the needs of the learners who live now here in 2024. So I think that even showing the film 10 years after it came out is a great thing to do because high tech high is still high tech high, and there's a lot more high tech high type schools across the country now. There's one in Idaho, One Stone Lab School. I did an episode with their school director. It absolutely blew my mind. Get this, sorry, side tangent for a second. One
Yeah, go
Stone
for it.
Lab School, One Stone Lab School has a board with 16 seats, board of trustees, essentially. 15 of those 16 seats are occupied by students, and they
Mm,
are real board members, and they have voting rights and the whole thing, right? So there are all these high-tech, high-type examples across the country. So if you did a screening now in the tri-state area, you will have very likely the same experience that I had when I screened it 9 years ago for the first time. It just builds conversations around what school could be. And the idea, Jackie, is not to replicate high-tech high. In no way, shape, or form did Ted want that to happen. What he wanted was to give people an opportunity to talk about in their place and in the culture that surrounds them to answer that question, what could
Mm,
school be or what could be school? And that's why doing this podcast is such a joy because I keep providing answers to that through the people that I feature. You know that, right?
yes.
Every one of your guests, and even in your book, you write about this, every one of your guests is providing another answer and another answer to what school could be. It's not monolithic. It's not a monolithic one size fits all answer. It all depends on where you teach, what that place is like, and what that culture is like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you're sharing with both how this screening developed. I love that they turned down Netflix. Big,
Yes.
big win there. And
Yes.
because it's about community. I
Yes.
always say and believe that real change happens when it's everyday citizens who genuinely care about something and they gather in community. And with that, there's like a tidal wave of change because you have the masses, right? And we want to put the power in the citizens' hands. And we want to say this is for the community to talk about and not just to make a buck on a big production streaming platform like Netflix. Great. Yeah, you'd make a lot of money and it would probably fall flat after some time, right? And really, most people who are going on Netflix, they're not watching films like that. I mean, they might be some people intrigued by it, but they're not going to have the conversations like you had with these community members. And I love that story about the school where the students are on the board. Students
Right.
should be invited to the table to vote and talk about the things that they want to see in their school because the school system is for them. We already went through it and we went through it, the old fashioned way. And so we should have them take part in that. And it should be about what the community wants their school to be and use maybe a model like
Yeah.
High Tech High, but
Yeah.
that's for that community. Obviously, Hawaii is very unique culturally and historically. Like you make schools that build their community. And we talked about this the last time we met. I think why I love that this is happening in Hawaii and that you want to make Hawaii kind of a model for the rest of like the school system, across the world is because when I worked there under No Child Left Behind, and then when I
Yeah.
moved back to the Philadelphia area, saying that I worked in Hawaii, all I got was negative responses. And
Yeah.
all I got was what it was placed in like the No Child Left Behind, area. And it just frustrated me because I'm like, no, it was a very, I don't know, unique community that embraced innovation, embraced creativity, embraced the community. There was a lot of agency that the students had and that the teachers had that I
Right.
didn't see in traditional schools in the area where I grew up in Pennsylvania and now I'm in New Jersey. And so I actually think that a screening here, particularly in like the
Yeah.
New Jersey, Philadelphia area, could carry a lot of impact. I know New York City has a little bit more of progressive and innovative schools, and they're doing a little bit more with like micro schooling and all of that. But at least in the area where I reside, it's still pretty like old school. And I think
Yeah.
that it could help
Yeah.
to elevate that conversation. So I'm definitely going to explore that. I love the community grassroots effort.
I have a quick story to tell you
Sure.
about like that would illustrate kind of how this works. And again, how blessed I am to be a podcast host to provide a platform for somebody to tell this particular story. We had a educator, public school educator on the island of Hawaii here, Kona High School, on the Kona side of Hawaii Island. She was given an award for social justice teaching in education. And when I found out about this, I snapped her up as a guest for the show. And the story that she told just absolutely blew my mind. So think about this. at Kona High School, which is a big, big high school on the Kona side, you have kids who speak dozens of languages. And imagine that you're a kid who speaks a language other than English coming on campus, how difficult it would be to navigate the school culture that is so geared towards English, right? So, what Natalie, who's a Spanish teacher and a language teacher and a linguist, what she did was develop a program where the kids' strengths at speaking their own language was parlayed into a center for transformative translation, meaning the kids started to provide services on campus for other kids coming on who are trying to figure out, like, where do I submit my transcripts, or where do I go to get counseling, or things like this, right? And so they're doing this also on a digital platform. So these services are available to people. So that's the kind of
Mm.
community effort, because now the kids are going home and they're talking to their parents in their native language and they're explaining what's going on. And the parents are like, wow, this is amazing, right? We've got a community field building at this particular school. And what a joy, Jackie, to be able to provide an episode to the world that allows Natalie's story to get out there.
Mm.
If it inspires somebody else to go, oh man, that's an idea that sparks me. Maybe I can build something like this
Yes.
where I am, like in urban, LA or in New York or even in rural Minnesota, wherever it happens to be. So that's just one example of where the power of that kind of school is community, community is school. That idea, once it gets loose, oh boy, it's got a real, as we say in Hawaii, it's got mana. It's got its own,
Yes, mana.
right? It's got its own feeling to it, its own power to it. So yeah,
And that is innovation. Like
yes,
innovation is not just about technology. Technology is a platform and a tool, but the
yeah,
innovation is about how you use all members of your community and their strengths. It's very much rooted in like positive psychology of you look
yes,
at all the members of your community and what they each bring to the table. And then you say, you know what? You have this strength. I want to use you here. And as the teacher being more of, again, the facilitator of that and
yeah,
creating a program, but the students are leading it. They are the ones running it. And then students, teaching students or guiding each other is so powerful. They love learning from one another and they love that something is in their hands, like they have ownership of it. That's
yeah,
brilliant. And I going back to the platform of podcasting, and I love to see like podcasting in schools as well, is that I think that I really do think this is the media that is equitable, the most equitable. I mean, anyone can really start one. I mean, as much as you want to grow it, you can get into like how you do marketing and all of that. But it's about everyday people sharing their voice and inspiring other people across the globe. And it
yes,
really does like equal the playing field. And it's not about who you know or who's getting on what TV show or what radio show. There's a lot of, politics with that. This is just like it's really, you might not go far right away, but anyone can start one. And I would love to
absolutely.
see students doing this, like in schools on their own, like sharing their ideas, their, interests, their lessons that they want to teach people. I know a lot of students are doing that maybe like also on YouTube. YouTube's out there, another great platform, which is, aligned with podcasting, but
Yeah.
such great stories. And I could see how this continues to be driving you and in your mission and your work. And I just love what you're doing. And I love that organic um, passion where you're just like, I watched something and I
Yeah.
just like had to be part of it. I had to be part of it. And now you're
Yes.
impacting
Yeah.
so many people.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share about both the podcast, the documentary, the mission, what you're maybe doing into 2024 future, if you want to share anything.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, and you're aware of this because you're part of it, on LinkedIn, we have started something called the NEP, or the Network of Education Podcasters. And I hope when this episode airs, if you post it in that group, we'll get some comments on
Yes.
it. I love the idea, and I'm going to be really putting some energy into this in 2024 of podcasters, hosts, producers in the education sector getting together to talk to each other, to build community, and to figure out like who's doing what episode about what, and what are your favorite episodes, what are your techniques, what are some of the ways that you're able to reach people. So I love that, and I'm going to be putting some energy into that. So if you're a LinkedIn member, listeners, you can dial me up at Josh Reppun on LinkedIn. I know that you're active on LinkedIn as well, Jackie. So that's one thing. And if you're an education podcaster, please get a hold of us because we would love to invite you into that group. The other thing that I'm really excited about, Jackie, in this particular moment is there is podcasting, which is audio and sometimes video as well. There's also educators who write. And I love the idea. You're one of them.
Hmm.
You have a book out. I mean, this is amazing. You have a book. I don't have a book. I wish I had written a book. But in a sense, I've sort of written a book with all of the questions that I ask my guests. That's a funny
Yes.
conclusion that I've come to. But What School Could Be has just launched yesterday, as a matter of fact. If you go to whatschoolcouldbe.org and in the nav bar, you click on the word Chronicles up at the top. We have launched a blog platform where we are going to be featuring educators who write. And I'm
Mm.
really excited about this because I love reading what educators write, and we need more and more educators to put themselves out there and share their stories with people. And it's also an inspiration to me as a podcast host because it gives me ideas for questions to ask guests. And I just think here at the beginning of 2024, we might be seeing a renaissance, if you will, of
Mm.
educators who write. And
Yes.
this is great stuff. Educators doing podcasts, educators who have their kids doing podcasts as a way of demonstrating their learning, and also educators who write and or who make short films. So in other words, educators, go for it, go for it, go for it. Get yourself out there. Let's build community together. And in the end, we're going to have this reimagined education movement. We're going to all be under one
Yes.
this seesaw. We're going to
I
push
love
this
it.
thing up, and we're going to be able to move forward together in student-driven learning and real-world learning. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, that was like the perfect way to explain this time. It is a renaissance. And I love how I think educators or those who are thinking about how to reimagine education is kind of at the forefront, right? Because
Yeah,
in this industry, in this field, it's all about thinking like learning and thinking of new ways to do things, like, exploration, experimentation, getting kind of messy, being okay with failure and going back to
yeah,
the drawing board. Like that is part of this Renaissance energy. And there used to always be the saying, those who can't do this in their field go on to teaching. And it just sounds like, oh, because you
yeah,
didn't make it in this, you went to go teach it. And it just sounds like, who wants to be a teacher then? No, we are the creatives. We are the
yes,
ones leading with our heart. And yes, get educators out there doing anything that is really inspiring that creation. I
yeah,
love this. It's going to be a fabulous year. I'm so excited. Oh, what energy. Thank you
yeah.
so much for coming on the Teacher Story and sharing this.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you for doing your podcast. You are doing the work of the gods, Jackie. You're getting
You-
teacher voices out there, and that's so important. So I really appreciate you for all the effort that you're putting into your show, on top of your teaching and everything else that you do. So that's great stuff. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. And for you too, with your podcast and all of your work that you're doing. Can you share with our listeners where they can find you? And I will put links in the show notes so that easy click on that and they can go right to any of your websites or anything else.
Yeah, easiest entry is whatschoolcouldbe.org. And in the nav bar at the top, you can click on podcast, and it'll take you to my podcast website where I have all my contact information and all of the episodes are listed. I'm in all the podcast apps, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all of that kind of stuff. And my email address is josh@whatschoolcouldbe.org. So I welcome anybody getting in touch with me for sure.
Thank you so much. That will be in the show notes. Please reach out to Josh and watch the film, maybe hold a screening,
Yes,
listen to the podcast. It's all going to be linked if you would like to learn more about that in the show notes. So thank you so much. And I love the Hawaii connection.
awesome.
Have a great day.
Woohoo! Well then,
Bye.
what happened?